Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I'm the director of the Disclosure Project and the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, cseti.org. If you want to find us on the web, cseti.org and disclosureproject.org. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us every couple of weeks. We have an opportunity during this time to update you with some of the experiences we've been having making contact with intelligent life forms from other star systems and the work we're doing for disclosure and also new energy. And I'm excited about today because this is really a show where we're basically going to play for you the evidence of contact that is really quite newsworthy. I have to say, if this was from the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, that has these large radio telescopes aimed at the stars, it would be front page news all over the world. And interestingly, we're making contact with instrumentation, and we have proof of this sort of contact and communication happening. And it's interesting how because it's not being done with the whistles and all the falderah of a giant radio telescope, the media so far hasn't picked up on this, but eventually I have no doubt they will. Basically, those of you who've been following our work will know that for the last couple of years we've had an amazing man who's joined our team, Emery Smith, who will be with us on the phone today on the show. And he will be playing some of these tones that we've had contact with, and I'm going to introduce that in a moment. And Emery has been doing amazing work with not only photography, but also helping to get the equipment and get instrumentation so that when we're having contact, we have not only photographic evidence, but also electronic and auditory evidence of the contact. And so I want to thank Emery for all that great work he's been doing for the last 2 years since he's gotten involved with CSETI. What we're going to do today is to really review first how it is that we make contact. And those of you who are new to the program, if you go to cseti.org, you'll see that we hold expeditions around the world 4 or 5 times a year. And we recently have just returned from an expedition in the United Kingdom where we went into the crop circles, and also we were in Colorado in June where we had amazing contact that occurred, and we're actually getting ready now to go to Mount Shasta in the next week or so. And I think that one of the things that people first ask is, how is this contact happening? And I just want to review briefly how it is that we do this. And there are really 3 main ways that we do it. And since we're on the World Puja Network, I'm going to emphasize first the trans-dimensional conscious manner. And in the science of consciousness, those of you who've studied awareness and the science of consciousness know that the mind is actually an omnipresent field of pure consciousness that enables each living person who's sentient to be awake and aware. And what we have discovered is that intelligent civilizations have technologies, and I have called it consciousness-assisted technologies, and also technologies that assist consciousness, where their communication systems are going at multiples of the speed of light and interface with a coherent thought and consciousness when it's established in an expanded state. Some would call it the samadhi state. But even in the relaxed state of mind, where the mind is more open and where you can begin to remote view, as they say, distant places in space, what we find is that these interstellar civilizations have the ability to pick up thought and to pick up consciousness when an individual or a group of individuals enter into that place of the placeless, the level of consciousness that's beyond the limits and the boundaries of linear space and time. And this makes sense because if you think about it, how are you going to travel at the speed of light or anything less than the speed of light between galaxies and star systems? If you take the Andromeda galaxy, it's 2.5 million light years from here, and our group has had contact with extraterrestrial beings from the Andromeda galaxy. As outrageous as that sounds to make that statement, but we have. And I think that when you think about the fact that even if you were traveling at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles every second that you're traveling at that kind of speed, it would take you 2.5 million years to get from that galaxy to here. If you're talking about even a nearby star system that's maybe 1% of the way through the Milky Way galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, our home galaxy, is 100,000 light years across. Well, 1% of that distance is 1,000 light years. So at the speed of light, it would take 1,000 years to get from that star system to Earth, and another 1,000 years to get back. And the same thing with radio signals. If you look at microwave, cell phone, television, radio, those are all traveling at the speed of light. So using those kind of instruments, it would take literally 2,000 years to have a two-way conversation between a star system 1,000 light years away and Earth. And that's the paradigm of, quote-unquote, modern science. Now, when I say modern science, I say the part of modern science that has suppressed all this information that's talked about the World Fusion Network. And I think that what we're finding is that the interstellar civilizations that are here, and which disclosureproject.org has proven are here, are using technologies that are way beyond the speed of light. And when you go through the crossing point of light, you enter into a transdimensional or hyperdimensional universe where the speed of light is no longer relevant. It's more, the question is, what's the speed of thought? What's the speed of consciousness? What's the capabilities of the so-called worlds of light and astral energy? All these subtle realms that are folded within space-time and actually transcend linear space-time. And so when you think about it, this ability to remote view, to go on the path of the seer, to awaken your inner sight and see remote places in space, this is, while very ancient on the one hand, very germane to the space age and the contact that we're having. And I think that the shamans and the enlightened people of past civilizations on Earth have all known this, whether it be ancient Egyptian or Himalayan or the Shambhala kingdom or the ancient peoples of South America and the native peoples of America. All of these civilizations, there's evidence, had contact with people from the stars, and they understood the central aspect of consciousness and thought in those protocols. Now, they may not have understood it quite as we do today, but the science is out there now that proves that the state of quiet consciousness, where you can then expand awareness into this universality of awareness, it is the beginning point of making contact. And so we have a program, we call it Ambassadors to the Universe, where we train people in these meditation techniques and in the ability to remote view and to travel amongst the stars faster than the speed of light in awareness and in thought, but then to use the thought to connect to these extraterrestrial peoples and their communication systems and their spacecraft and vector them or show them exactly where we're located. So, for example, we might be in the desert of Colorado, and we will form a circle out in the wilderness, and we will then go into a deep meditative state and then begin to expand awareness to where we then rise upward above the desert into space, and a number of people will then begin to see in their inner sight an extraterrestrial person or spacecraft or planet. And the instruction at that point is then to introduce yourself and welcome them to Earth in universal peace and to show them where we're located. And we then turn the remote viewing around to an active vectoring where we actually guide them into our location through thought. And we will then show them, for example, our planet Earth, which is the third planet from our sun, and then North America, if that's where we are, and then the Colorado region, and then the desert where we're located, all the way down to a few square meters right into the center of our circle. And this is done with a whole group of people doing this. It's a very, very powerful technique. And without exception, we have contact in some form or another, whether it's a craft that materializes, something that an orb that floats through the circle, electromagnetic signals that come in that are then, even though we're in remote areas, begin to go through electromagnetic detectors we have. And so this is quite extraordinary. Now, the conscious component of this is the key thing. We also use two other techniques, and one is we have a high-powered laser that goes up about 200 miles into space in clear air, and then we also have electromagnetic tones that we have had from contact, and also were recorded in the crop circles, that we then play over just regular radio frequencies that we send out into space to give a very precise location in case people's minds aren't as clear as a laser might be. So we use the light, the sound, and thought to make contact and invite these civilizations to Earth. The purpose of all this is not just to see a UFO or something, but is it actually to usher in an era when humans become interstellar people, and that we open up this period in time where the Earth becomes a truly part of an interplanetary society, living in peace with these other civilizations. So this is the central purpose of CSETI, and this is what we do when we take groups out to these remote locations around the world. Now, one of the things that I just want to explain, some of the equipment we have on site, we have a whole lot of different equipment. Some of it is rather what you would expect. We have good night scope binoculars, and we have excellent cameras with night scope vision attached to the lenses. We have the lasers I mentioned and the audio equipment. We also have audio recording devices, because frequently a craft or civilization will appear in its tonality. And those of you who know pujas and the Vedas know that name precedes form. Frequently there'll be a signal that'll come out of space to the group, and we will record that. We have on a number of occasions. Now, we also have electromagnetic devices. These are things like radar detectors, like you'd have in your car to pick up a police car signal when they're trying to catch you speeding. But we also have devices such as a magnetometer, and this is a magnetic field meter that actually picks up the fluxing or the movement in the magnetic field of the Earth. And it's set, when we first get onto a site, it's set at 0. So basically, there's a certain magnetic field on Earth or any place on Earth, and you set the meter to 0 so it's silent. When an extraterrestrial vehicle or communication begins to happen, and it's happening from within space-time, it's not happening in a linear way. We'll get into this in a moment. Those detectors will begin to go off and actually begin to communicate in ways that they are not built to do. It's really an amazing thing to witness. And this has been happening in an increasing fashion since 2007 and 2008, the last 3 or 4 years. And what we're finding is that the extraterrestrial civilizations doing this will be doing the communication through these electronics, while at the same time they're appearing as ships of light or as craft that fully materialize around us. And this goes on throughout the evening. So we have begun to record these detection systems. And you have to remember, we're out in very remote areas. These are not being set off by a police car or by any man-made items, because we're in very remote areas. And it's amazing to see, because it's become not just an indication where they're saying we're here, but they're also communicating specific energy as a contact that you can actually feel. It's almost like, from a energetic point of view, a transcendental level of communication that's deep within consciousness, even has an emotional and spiritual quality to it, even though it may be the sound of it's coming through a rather ordinary piece of man-made equipment like a magnetic field meter. Another piece of equipment we have is something that's called a storm tracker, and this is something that Emory acquired last year, I believe it was, and it picks up the electrostatic discharge of a lightning strike. It's what it's built for. It's for campers and outdoors people to warn them of the approach of an electrical storm. What we found, however, is that the extraterrestrial civilizations that are involved with our group have chosen to use that in a very specific way, which we'll get into in a moment, where it will go off in a sequence and in ways that are very anomalous, even though there are absolutely no electrical storms within hundreds of miles of us. And what we're finding is that they are going within the circuitry, within, I call it infraspace, but within space-time, to communicate through these devices. In other words, if a police radar gun hits one of these radar detectors, they just make a very loud burst of noise until you get past the policeman. Those of you who've ever used this is not what's happening. These are actually coming within the circuitry, and we will have an identical, say 3 or 4 identical laser and radar detectors, and they will only select one, for example, that might be beside me or beside Emory, and they'll begin to communicate in a very anomalous way. The others will not go off at all, even though if it was something man-made that was a linear beam of electromagnetic energy, it would go off. They should all go off on the same frequency at the same time. This isn't happening. They're selectively communicating, and it's sort of what I'm calling this is transdimensional electronic communication, where it's coming through multiple dimensions beyond the speed of light, and then stepping down into linear space-time and communicating within these particular devices. And this is often happening while at the same time we're having extraordinary things that we're seeing or hearing with our ears around us, or even beings that appear in the field near us. So all this is taking place sort of simultaneously, and the reason it is because these civilizations that are visiting the Earth are very eager to make contact with awake humans who are doing this for the purpose of peace, who don't have prejudice against them, and who are doing this for the ability to create a whole new chapter in human history where the sciences of consciousness and the science of new energy and free energy and the ability to live on this planet peacefully become established. And that's really what we're doing. And we feel that the reason we're having this escalating level of contact is because the time for all the secrecy that's going on is ending, and the time for the disclosure of this being known fully by everyone on Earth is very much nearer. And I think that the ETs are interested in finding humans who understand the science of consciousness, as well as these sort of space-age hyperdimensional or transdimensional electronics, so that they can communicate with us. And that's what we're having happen. So I just wanted to give a few minutes of this sort of introduction, and we want to get right into it, because what's happened, and Emory, you can share kind of your experience, what happened in Crestone with this detector, and it was happening on the level of consciousness, but also on the level of the meters themselves. And I want people to hear, a detailed description of kind of what you and I experienced.
Well, it always precedes or after someone will see something, or the craft will be coming, and right when that happens, these magnetometers and storm trackers and radar detectors, before it happens, will start alarming us, and they'll start going off in very specific tones that are not native to the device at all.
Right.
And like Steve said, they are coming from within space. So it's not something that's, coming from a directional. And as it escalates, we usually have an event happen. Now, what happened with Steve and I at one point is the magnetometer, this started back in France, actually.
Right.
The first time this happened. And that was when we had an amazing craft that was actually filmed over the field in France. And we walked out to that field, and between Steve and I only, the magnetometer was having a motion that was like a beating heart, and it would constantly beep and beep and beep. And it was only between Steve and I at around our solar plexus and our root chakra in this area, when we held the magnetometer between us at our waistline, that this would become very active. And now at that time, we are also feeling something. Both of us are having an experience. And the same thing happened in Crestone this past year.
Right, right.
And there seems to be a triad between Steve, myself, and these ETs, that when we get together, and I mean very close, within a 3-foot proximity, that this magnetometer starts escalating, and there's a type of download that's coming.
Right.
And this is all happening on many different levels, on a conscious aspect, on a spiritual aspect, and a physical aspect as well. It's a type of communication that's happening. And what I'm experiencing through this is I can actually feel in my light body that there is a connection to oneness. And it may sound strange. I never really talked to you, Steve, about this, but I feel like we're joining together, the three of us, as one.
Right.
And I can feel this bond, and I can see and feel the download that comes from within. Being a human in a crystalline structure, and these devices have crystalline diodes in them, and I think has a lot to do with it also, with these tones that are coming through interdimensional time, that Steve and I, when we're in this triangular formation, holding this magnetometer, are a kind of antenna.
Correct.
And this antenna is absorbing messages and communication downloads that is actually affecting us on a microcosm level of our DNA. And this change is permeating from a microcosm to a macrocosm, and it's constantly expanding in a waveform so that it will affect not only ourselves, but the people who are right around us. It affects those people and the planet, Gaia, and it actually expands out through the entire humanity of Earth. And it's a beautiful change that's happening, and it's starting, I'm sure, in many places, but it's absolutely starting with the CSETI group and Steve and I, it's like the doorway, which is opening, and the changes are coming. And like I said to you earlier, Steve, I mean, ever since Crestone, that download that we had out there where the magnetometer was over 3 milligauss for quite some time, at least 45 minutes.
Right. This was in Crestone, Colorado in June, by the way. Yeah.
Right. In June, when these little beings were approaching the circle, and we had them there at one part of the circle, and in the center of the circle, at one point, you came up to me, and the magnetometer, as I was filming all this, the magnetometer went absolutely off the scale, and that's when I had this amazing enlightenment experience,
right,
where my body was vibrating.
That's right.
Inside. It was vibrating inside, and I felt this warmth come in, kind of like the warmth like you stand too close to a TV set or a microwave, where you feel some inner heat coming. But it wasn't like the microwave or TV where it felt like it was negative at all. It was a very positive experience. But it was a download. It was absolutely energy coming into our bodies, the both of us, and changing us inside. And ever since Crestone, specifically Crestone, my dreams have been so pure and high def and lucid. I say high def because it's so specifically clear that, I have dreams all the time, but when I was much younger, around the age of 10, I used to be able to control my dreams and do whatever I want in my dreams. So I lost that ability as I got older and into high school. And then recently I regained that ability.
Right.
So
right.
Any intention before I lay down to go to sleep, I can dream about that, whatever that intention is.
Right.
And I will wake up.
Yeah, lucid dreaming, yeah. And it's amazing how that opens with this sort of contact.
Mm-hmm. So you can, have this dream, and you can control what's going on in the dream and find out many different things. And you're aware that you're dreaming.
Right.
And I'm just going to say that the access that you have in that state of consciousness is unlimited.
That's right.
I will leave it at that. It's unlimited. And it's, you can call it the morphogenic field. You can call it whatever you like. It's unlimited access to beyond the universe and all the dimensions that there is, if you choose to use that.
Correct, because that's the nature of the mind within. There's a wonderful saying from the Sufi tradition that says, thinkest thyself a puny form when within thee the universe is folded. And that literally within each individual, by virtue of the nature of consciousness, the entirety of the universe, all the dimensions, all the worlds of light, the vastness of space-time, and the infinity of pure mind is folded within each person. So we're each individual a quantum hologram, and this is one of the things that we found is that what we're doing, since we're on the World Puja Network, I'll talk about this in the many interviews I won't, but we're doing pujas. We're doing ancient Sanskrit Vedic pujas in the circle and with the entire group. And this is increasing the level of resonant contact. When Emery just mentioned in France, I just wanted to make a comment. This ship that was hovering over the field that he photographed, and many of us saw it blip in very quickly, just like at the speed of light. It came after I set up the puja table in this field on this 2,000-acre estate in France, and that's when they came. And I turned to everyone. I said, "Well, they're coming for the puja," because what people don't realize is that the ancient knowledge of the science of consciousness, the Vedas, the Sanskrit, the ancient knowledge of spirit, and the different siddhis, SIDDHIS, abilities. These are all things that have been taught and been kept alive by an unbroken lineage of teachers and enlightened beings that have been involved with the earth. But those beings are also very involved with these extraterrestrial civilizations, some of which are literally the guardians physically of this planet and of the earth and the nurturing of humanity. And those are the ones we're having this contact with on an increasing level. And over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been an exponential increase, and it's not just a bunch of noise from an electromagnetic device. It is actually, as Emery said, you can actually, while it's happening, I can see in my mind's eye the actual beings, and I can receive the information. It's sort of the meaning of what they're saying, although it's very abstract. To move it from that abstract level of trans-dimensional consciousness and very, in a sense, space-age communication into English language is something that you have to really get out of your own way and become sort of a really clear channel for it. But in this book that came out about 1.5 years ago, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, there's the last chapter is called the Orion Transmissions. And in 2000, 2007, and 2008, we had at Joshua Tree National Park where I actually became this antenna, like Emery's talking about, and this burst of energy came through for 23 minutes, and then the next year for over an hour or two. Now it's happening, in increasing frequency, and it has to do with almost a triangular energy field between me and Emery and these ETs, and I hate to say this, but it's almost as if they're using our bioelectric field and consciousness and the integration of our bioelectromagnetic field and consciousness through the chakra system to facilitate this sort of contact that then is causing these electromagnetic detectors to be very specifically kind of in resonant tuning with that during this communication. It's an extraordinary experience. And it's really becoming more and more intense with each expedition that we go on.
Yeah, and like you said, I do agree with the part that it may not actually be coming through the detector, but actually through us to the detector to decipher.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what I feel, because as you notice, when we move the detector away from us, Steve, it's not that active. But when someone brings the detector to us, then the information is exchanged, and the recorder or whatever it is starts, the magnetometer will start going berserk. And each tone also that emanates from these magnetometers has a message in it. And like Steve says, if you relax the mind and focus on that, it's a wealth of information, including who these beings are and what the message is.
Right.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I try to interpret that for people as it's happening to a point, but some of it is it's so much so quickly that it almost has to unfold over time. And, this is really an extraordinary level of contact that's happening, and it is transdimensional, and yet there sort of has to be a portal into linear space-time and Earth and humanity for it to happen. And since this first began to happen 3 or 4 years ago, I've said to everyone that what they're really doing is they're using our willingness to go into this state of samadhi and pure contact to then enter into linear space-time and through the morphogenic field of our own bioelectric field, genetic field, it's then going into the hearts and minds of everyone on the planet. It literally is affecting the whole planet, and you can feel it. It's really an extraordinary and profound experience that is about it coming through us rather than us making it happen, as it were. It's something that we have to, I guess, be a clear enough vehicle for this to come through, and that's the art of this. The art of it is being able to get out of your own way and let this come through, and then the amazing things that happen, not only that's being photographed and seen with the eyes and felt, but the energy transformation that's taking place, which is, if you look at the whole Earth as sort of a crystalline field of consciousness and energy, which is what it is, it's actually resonating around the whole planet and everyone on the planet as it enters us. And we will actually, for example, in England, we actually had a burst of light that was right above the group that was so bright that it was coming out of transdimensional space-time, and it was physically visible, but you could tell it was originating from the level of the celestial level of the extraterrestrial worlds. In other words, civilizations that are physical and have planets, but where everyone on those planets are in a state of God consciousness at the level of celestial beings. So it's almost that they're operating at the level of God consciousness where it would be as if they were angels, except they're not angels. They're physical beings from other star systems, but their whole civilization is evolved to that level. And that's what's beautiful, is that humanity is headed to that. Humanity eventually is going to be, over the next few 100,000 years, we will all evolve into God consciousness people who as a civilization will then go amongst the stars. And this is the path that we're on, because what's happening in this whole new era that's opened up is that as this 500,000-year cycle is opening and then this old cycle is closing, there's a lot of chaos on the planet. But what this is really about is that a group of people, all of us together who understand these concepts, coming together and creating this morphogenic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about that affects the entire Earth and everyone on it, but and that then puts us firmly on that path of enlightenment and free energy and the ending of poverty and suffering and the entering into this age of enlightenment. But at the same time, we are doing this with full conscious awareness that we're not doing this alone, that there are civilizations out there that stand ready to assist us, but they're not going to force it. One of the things that I kept getting the message was that they have to have humans willing to be vectors or channels for this to happen. It's not like they're going to land on the White House lawn and force us into some sort of state of peace and enlightenment and interplanetary civilization, because it doesn't work that way. I mean, we've seen how successful trying to turn Afghanistan into a Jeffersonian democracy has worked. It works in this other way, where people have to awaken to this, put themselves at service to universal peace, and in higher states of consciousness make this change happen. And that's what we're literally experiencing. So a lot of people who think that when they come on these expeditions or coming to sort of a seminar, they find out within about 12 hours that they're actually part of history in the making, and they're observing and being then part of. And what's wonderful is that these groups have become more and more resonant and coherent over the last year or two. And what we're finding is that the people who are being guided to come are the people who need to be there. And it's just, the whole group becomes sort of a morphogenic field, opening this portal to these other civilizations and to these other dimensions.
Absolutely. Do you want to play one of those tones?
Yeah, let's do. I mean, for folks who want to hear this, I want to play, just give you an example on what you're going to hear. Now, this is the magnetometer you're going to play now, right?
Yes.
So let me just explain again. This is a device. You can get a tri-field meter, and it has a magnetic field detector that, as I mentioned before, will pick up the changing of the magnetic field around you. You can set it at 0. And those of you who are interested, I mean, there's a CSETI app if you have an iPhone or an iPad, where you can also download the protocols for contact from the App Store, and it's called the CSETI Contact app. And that app actually does turn your iPhone into a magnetometer. And but the magnetometer you're going to hear is sort of a professional grade one that's designed to pick up the magnetic field changes. And if you were to walk over to, say, a car engine or a motor, it would go really crazy because of it would just go and make a bunch of noise. Here you're going to hear this sort of nuance. In fact, sitting there out in the desert, we're around the middle of nowhere and there's no motors or nothing. When this begins to happen and this sort of connection occurs, it is so profound because you can see in your mind's eye the ETs there. There are actually physically things that you're seeing and experiencing. But then at the same time, there is this message coming through, and there's a nuance. It was almost, in Creston, it was almost like a symphony of subtle sounds that came through. I don't know how much it came through on the recording, but we're just going to play a little bit of it right now for you. Coming in, it's spiraling in. It's this form.
You hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting about this, by the way, for folks, a lot of people who are hearing it in the circle, they're going, "Oh, this sounds a great deal like a almost like dolphins speaking, or a dolphin kind of like the sound that they make." And there is a quality to it, and it isn't at all like what these magnetometers make when you're putting it towards an artificial, man-made source of energy. Now, remember, this is going on for, 45 minutes? I think you said, Emery.
Yes. Yes, at least 45 minutes in Crestone, where it was a solid 45 minutes of activity. And the activity was varying from different types of tones. It wasn't the same tone over and over.
Right.
It would start, actually, one of the tones that came in was very famous. The same one that came into France was a dun, dun, da, dun. And it was like dun, dun, da, dun, like the beginning, here we are coming. And then from there, it goes into a very, very technical type of message.
Yeah, very technical. Yes, it was.
Very technical. And it takes, for someone to listen to this, you really have to be in a special state of mind to decipher what's really happening.
Right.
And you really have to tone in and clear your mind and clear your ego and let it come inside and feel that message. And I said feel the message because you're feeling it.
Right, and it is at the level of the heart. Now, what happened in England, we'll play some of that in a minute. It went on for over an hour. We were in a crop circle near Silbury Hill, which is this conical-shaped man-made 4,500-year-old Neolithic monument that the purpose of which is not understood. Let's just leave it at that. Now, there was a crop circle that appeared very close to there this year. It manifested this day that we arrived in England, literally. I'm not kidding. And so we took our whole group in there. This is in the middle of the day, and I did a puja in this crop circle. And Emery couldn't come because he had a business appointment he couldn't get out of. So Emery wasn't there, and Emery, along with the magnetometer, is usually the other pole of the triad if you look at an equilateral triangle. Well, I was intuitively told to pick up a droji. Now, those of you who don't know what that is, Tibetan lamas have these things called drojis, and they're sort of brass wrapped around an metallic iron rim in the center, and it's two types of metal, and they are intended to be a facilitation of rapid enlightenment. And someone had given this, someone who is with, I won't say what country, but a country's intelligence officer who very much supported what we were doing and who was secrecy, gave us this droji a couple of years ago. So I picked up that droji. I had my right hand, I had the droji. My left hand, I had the magnetometer. And my heart, the center of my chest, made the third point in this triangle. And we're sitting, I'm facing Silbury Hill in the center of this crop circle, having done this puja, Sanskrit puja, where right afterwards we all meditated and went into this deep state of pure consciousness. And suddenly we have over an hour of this sort of the most beautiful and intense communication coming through this vector, this sort of portal that was created. And I realized after a little while that the droji and the central spine of the droji was taking the place of Emery's chakra system in his spinal cord. I mean, I could actually see it, and it was like the droji was standing in for Emery. I mean, in a bizarre sort of way. And what happened was then this over hour-long transmission that was spellbinding. And I mean, there were people who, of course, were visiting this crop circle, had no idea, or they knew, unfortunately, who I was, because I'm, people kind of know who I am. But they were lit, and they were going, "What? WTF?" I don't want to say it on the air, but is going on. I'm standing there. I'm standing there, or sitting there, in this crop circle, and the crop circle had a Sanskrit theme to it. Actually, it was almost like a mandala, and part of this crop circle had a central part of it looked almost like a head with a third eye, and that's where we made our circle and where we did the puja. And this went on, and I could actually see the interstellar civilizations and the crop circle makers that made the crop circle, and the ones that had ancient connection to the earth that were very tall, luminous, kind of white beings that many of you may have heard about this last summer. Within a few yards of where this crop circle appeared, there was another one that had appeared near Silbury Hill. And the police had been called out because apparently some farmer had seen people in the field at night, and there were reports he might have shot at them. So the police were out investigating this, and suddenly this police officer for the Wiltshire County Police saw this tall, luminous white being, fully materialized, running through the crop circle and in the field. And so he chased it. He chased this being. Now, this is an amazing account, and a lot of this is reported on Colin Andrews' side, who's worked with me for many, many years, and who invented the term crop circle. And so here we are within this short distance. And by the way, when the policeman was chasing this ET, he chased it and got close enough, but when he got too close to him, the extraterrestrial being dematerialized, and there were footprints where this ET had moved, and then they vanished into the wheat and just into clear space, and they actually documented this. Now, of course, this police officer was really freaked out because he thought all this stuff was bunk, and he knows better now. But we're in this same area a year later, having this contact. We see, actually, in fact, a member of our team actually photographs a disc right over the field where we are. And we're doing this puja, and suddenly we have this long transmission, and it's from this ancient civilization that's been involved with Earth since before Neolithic times. And that was chased, the member of this ET civilization was chased by the police that particular night. And we're there, and this contact is going on, and the communication is this really profound message about the Earth. The time of its transformation is at hand, that we have got to create a world of peace, that it goes into space peacefully. There are all these sort of aspects to the message, but it all started after the puja, and when I was holding this droji and the magnetometer in an equilateral triangle with my heart, just like usually there's Emery, and me and the magnetometer making a triangle. And again, this portal opened and out came all this communication. We're out in the middle of this, thousands of acres of wheat fields, by the way, when this is happening. So I don't know if you want to play some of that for
Sure.
folks. Communication from the makers.
Very active.
It was unbelievable. And, we had an electromagnetic engineer who had worked and actually retired with Los Alamos National Lab who knows this kind of equipment. And the audio expert who has been studying this for us, Charlie Balog, who works in the Phoenix area, and it's with our contact group in the Phoenix area, and works with Trudy Geiker there. He has listened to this, and there's a very long analysis that's going to go up on our website about these tones. They are not tones that this device can make through a man-made source, and it's clearly direct communication from the ETs. And the reason this is so significant, I always want people to think about this. Imagine if the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico with the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence that Carl Sagan started, which is really a smokescreen. They know that we're already being visited. They're doing all that just to make it look like we haven't had contact yet. We're still looking. And this is the whole scientific fraud that's happening and being perpetuated on the public. But imagine if they were to have gotten over an hour of intelligent communication through one of those radio telescopes like this. It would be stop the presses worldwide. And that's what's now happening at virtually every one of these expeditions, not only with the craft that we're seeing and photographing and the beings that are there, but these electromagnetic communications. And unraveling and unfolding the message is, quite frankly, a very consciousness-centered process, but it's beautiful, beautiful energy. And I know that the people who are there when this is happening are in a state of a complete amazement, and also sense the beauty and the spirituality of it. It actually has an emotional and spiritual feeling and message to it when it's happening. And yet at the same time, there's a great deal of intelligence, almost mathematical, hyperdimensional mathematics that are coming through us and through us into the earth. And that's what I think is actually having an effect, and it's hard to describe, as it comes from consciousness and astral, the worlds of light, into linear space-time through us. It's actually affecting the genome. It's actually affecting the genetics and the physical plane. It's actually altering space-time. And I think this is happening because really, if you look at everything being connected non-locally through consciousness, those of you who have studied the science of consciousness, this is actually having an effect globally and on everyone on the planet. And we can feel that. We feel like we're just sort of like, it's just a portal is opening and we're a vehicle for this. But we're a resonant field, and we have to be there to do it, because there has to be, it's sort of like a step-down transformer, if you know what that is. If you have a power plant that has 1 billion watts of power coming out of it, for you to get 110 watts to run your computer at home, there have to be step-down transformers, or it'd blow out your circuitry of your house and your computer. You can't handle 1 billion watts. And it's sort of something like that. It's sort of like we're being step-down transformers collectively through contact with these advanced civilizations, and there's something happening not only to us and through us, but into the earth and into Gaia and into the other people of the planet. And it's an amazing and beautiful thing to experience.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. And one of the other things, if we can touch base on it before the show's over, is I really would like to talk about the Thunderbolt Storm Tracker and the way that it follows you. And let me elaborate a little bit on this. The Storm Tracker, which we talked about earlier, which is used to identify supercells, which are huge thunderstorms, about 10% of most storms, and lightning that's within the storm, and squall lines. This device is really only made to go off if there's a storm or if there's lightning nearby. However, ours has been entrained in a way that there's these sentinel beings, like the security beings, that are in contact with Steve and have been with Steve all his life, I think. And what happens is they're using this storm tracker to communicate to us that they're there. And the way we know this is that the storm tracker I carry around with me. I live in Florida, and we use a storm tracker a lot. So I know how it responds to storms. I also know how it responds when I'm driving around. And when I am with Steve and driving him around, the storm tracker, when we're on our way to the site, and Steve gets in the car, and the car is ready, I'm in there in the car. As soon as Steve sits down in the car, the storm tracker beeps. and it's basically like contact. Like, as soon as his body sits in the seat, it's like, okay, confirmed. Right. Dr. Greer's in the vehicle.
Right.
As we're moving out the driveway, we make a right-hand turn. Beep, beep again as we make the turn. Okay, there was a change in the direction of Dr. Greer. Now, on every turn that we do, the detector goes off.
Correct.
And what I believe is happening is there's a frequency that Steve gives off. We all have a bioprint frequency, I believe. It's an energy field, like a thumbprint, fingerprint, if you would. And we all have a different frequency we give off. And I believe that the ETs have locked on specifically to Steve's frequency. And anytime he moves, they're saying that we are here, we're there to protect.
Correct. And this has been going on for years, but now we have a device that they've actually selected and, as he said, and trained to go off. Now, to show you how bizarre this is, I mean, we're in England where there's no electrical storms, nothing. While we're there, it would go off the minute we would start to go somewhere, and then it would go off. If I had it in my backpack, it would go off until I put my pack down in my room at the hotel. When I'm stationary, it tends to just be quiet. Like once we're set up in the field, we were in this 2,000 or 1,800 acre estate in England, but it would go off while I was moving. But as soon as they got a fix on me, it was quiet. What's interesting is that one time I was in the and we come in at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, this has got to get quiet because it's people are sleeping. And one day I had that thought, and I opened the bag, and it had turned itself off. Now the batteries hadn't died, and it has a recessed button that you have to physically push and hold down to turn it off. It was absolutely consciousness interfacing technology. The ETs picked up on that thought and switched it off. There are so many bizarre things with these electronics that you have to really kind of be there to believe it. But please believe me, this is what's happened. We have many, many witnesses to this, and it was so beautiful because what I feel from this is that there's for lack of a better word, a guardianship or group of beings that are sentinels and guardians that are very aware of what we're doing, and in some respects, some of the dangers involved, because we're taking on, a multi-trillion-dollar secret program that does not want the public to know what you're hearing today. And they are there to be sure that we're okay. And we've never not been alone. I'll just put it that way. But this is a way that they're confirming for it. And literally, it's almost like a cosmic GPS, because every time we'll make a turn or change in direction, it'll go off. Now, in England, every time there would be something like a danger in the road or something, I would think, oh, there's a dangerous situation. It would go off as if to say, we have your back. It's really very, very strange. And this is not something this is not a cheap piece of equipment. It's not malfunctioning. And it's doing it very specifically under specific conditions as a way of letting all of us know that we're protected. But yeah, somehow they're well, because I'm the director of the project, I guess, kind of locked on to my frequency. And I think there is there's a field of energy where consciousness and the bioelectric and the chakra fields all come together. And everyone who knows meditation knows that. But that's kind of how they're connecting. but they're using this electronic device to confirm their presence and to make sure they're completely locked on no matter where we're moving. It's amazing.
It is, and sometimes if I get to the circle before you, another point is if I have the storm tracker, when you enter the circle, it goes off.
Right.
So it's aware that even though it's not with you, it's aware of your light and your frequency and your energy field as you approach the target area.
Right, and this gets us into the whole thing of, how extraordinary these civilizations are and patient that they are, here assisting in this work for contact and the creating of universal peace. And it's actually very touching and very beautiful. And even though this has happened now hundreds of times, I never cease to be humbled and amazed by it, to be honest with you, and kind of gobsmacked. It's just fantastic. And for those of you who are interested, we are going to be going to the remote Southern California desert in October, and for a week in a place that's a 700,000-acre wilderness area. So those of you who want to join us on that expedition, we will be there. I don't have the dates here in front of me, but it will be in October, and the information is at cseti.org. And then we have plans to also do an expedition in Arizona in February, and then in Florida again in March or April. So stay tuned, and if you're interested, you can get on our notification list at cseti.org, and we'll keep you informed of our progress and our plans for future events. Well, I think we're out of time, Emery, and I want to thank you for joining us in this discussion. And also for all of your help over the last couple of years. It's been amazing how much you've brought to this effort, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Well, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Puja Network for inviting us here every 2 weeks to update you on the progress of CSETI and disclosureproject.org. And I hope to see some of you at some of these expeditions under the stars. And if you're interested, you can go to disclosureproject.org to get the training kit to make contact as well, and also find out about the CSETI app, as I mentioned, if you have an iPhone or an iPad. So until next time, God bless you. Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer, and I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every couple of weeks to bring you up to date on what we're doing at cseti.org and disclosureproject.org and the orionproject.org. And we're here today to talk about some exciting developments with Sirius.neverendinglight.com, the film that we're working on to end the secrecy on this subject. And also we'll be talking with Marilyn and Diane, who are from a contact team that CSETI has in the New York area, outside Albany, New York, and their experiences in putting together this contact team and the amazing experiences they've had over the last couple of years since working on this together. And I think people will be really interested to hear what an interested party can do once they learn how to make these protocols that we have developed for ET contact work in a team setting, in a group setting, and the sort of experiences that are open to anyone who wants to try to do it. And along those lines, I just want people to know that we have sort of a great announcement today. We just got up on the play.google.com site, where you get your Android apps, the CSETI protocols for making contact, and it's called the ET Contact Tool if you're looking at play.google.com. For a while we've had it on the iTunes store at Apple for iPhones, but we did not have it in an Android form, but we have just beta tested it, and it's available now, I am told, as of this morning. So those of you who have Android phones, smartphones, let me just tell you that what this app has, it actually has the meditation protocols for making contact. It has the entire process of what these protocols entail, how to do the meditation and the remote viewing training. It has the tones that we had recorded from the crop circles that we send out into space. and you can play them off of your phone, and your phone can be hooked to a speaker if you want. So everything but a laser in your consciousness will be on this app, and it actually goes through a lot of how to develop these contact teams like Marilyn and Diane have done, and what you need to have in terms of equipment. So it's really a complete package, and it's available now at play.google.com for those of you who have Android smartphones. Of course, it's been available for a time now at the iPhone store, and it's called the ET Contact Tool if you're going to that site looking up how to find it. So those of you who want to get that and have been asking about it, it's now available. So that's really good news. So without further ado, I'd like to thank and welcome Marilyn and Diane for being with us today. Hello, folks.
Hello. Hello. Glad to be here.
Yes, well, why don't you share with people a little bit about how you guys got involved and the kind of experiences you've been having in New York with this amazing team. It's one of the strongest CSETI.org contact teams in the world, and I think it's just really a great story to share with people.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It is a great story, and this is Marilyn talking. And, well, we went to several expeditions with you and your team, and as a result, we came home and said we have to continue this work. And we began with a really small group, and over the last year, the group has grown, and what I'd like to talk about for a minute is just the nature of this group. We have the range of people in this group, Stephen, and the age range. We have from like 20 to like 70.
Awesome.
And then we have attorneys and teachers and ministers and sanitation workers from New York City and firemen and police, women and just a genetic researcher. I mean, people with all walks of life and all ages, and they've come here with such a commitment. Some people drive 4 hours to get here for one evening's work, and it's just amazing the commitment of this group. And we've noticed that as the commitment from all of these people, and we grow every time there are new people. We had somebody fly up from Virginia Beach for the one in June, and people feel the cohesiveness that has developed over time, and that cohesiveness has markedly changed the kind of contact we're having. And so anybody who wants to start a group and can get members to come on a regular basis, I mean, the consciousness changes in this group, and we are doing such heart contact at this point with our ET friends, and it's every single night. There's a very small group that goes out almost every night on this property. There is contact every single night. And then on the monthly meetings, we're having amazing things, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the other thing we've noticed is having this group on the same land. We live way out in the woods,
right,
and in the country, and so we have very little activity in the skies that get in the way, except when lately the military helicopters have been hovering. But we doing it on the same land, it's almost like even the land has created a cohesiveness to the earth consciousness that we're doing this contact on. And so it feels like there's just the ETs know we're here, they know our commitments, they understand our kind of consciousness levels that continue to increase. And as a result of the last couple of months, I'll just go into some of the things that have been happening. Each night, each monthly meeting, we've probably seen at least 25 crafts.
Right.
Distinguished from satellites, because we have the satellite chart, and we're all beginning to feel the difference. But these crafts, the power-ups that happened last, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago with the global CSETI, we had power-ups that were responding both to our thoughts and to the laser, and they powered up so strong and then disappeared and powered up again and to our questions. And then we had flash bulbs that were just extraordinary come in. And this stuff now just seems like normal material. Our tri-field meters, sometimes when this extra activity is coming in, are just registering such high magnetic energy. The radar detector, when we first got together the last time, gave us the 3 beats I am here right when we convened and started the group. And again, we live out in the country. There's nothing that I often have the radar detector on at different times when we're not doing contact work, and it just doesn't go off. It's just
right.
there.
Right. In the way of explanation, before you go much further, because I think we're going to lose a lot of people who don't know what the protocols are and the kind of equipment we have. One of the protocols we use, of course, is in group consciousness and meditation, where we then do a remote viewing process where people are trained to see with their inner sight, and this, of course, all the World Puja people understand this aspect of non-local consciousness, to see where the extraterrestrial vehicles are, even go visit to their planets or their spacecraft, and then we turn it around into a vector where we actually zoom in from wherever we sense they are into where we're located. So if you're in some land outside Albany, New York, and in a wilderness area, then you show them that part of the United States, and then you show them exactly that area and the farm and your group, and zoom right in like you're zooming in from outer space. Or if you sense that the ET vehicles are under the water out in the Atlantic Ocean, or if you feel that they're in the Earth somewhere, you connect to them there and guide them from that location. So wherever you sense them and see them in your inner sight, then you guide them in. Then what starts happening is what Marilyn was talking about. We'll have these brilliant bursts of light that occur in the sky that we call light bulbs. And it's like a flash bulb where you have this, if someone were in the sky and set off a flash bulb, but there's nothing there. And you can see with night scope binoculars, there's no aircraft, there's no plane, there's no, like, what have you, or an object will come over and get very bright and send a light towards us. And we always have satellite charts to rule out that it could be a satellite or a iridium satellite that kind of spins and puts out a lot of light. So we do all that, and then the electronics we have on site include, and by the way, these iPhone and Android apps turn your phones into magnetometers also, but we have these what are called tri-field meters that pick up electromagnetic fields of energy, and we usually set it on a magnetic field because the ET vehicles, when they're dematerialized but are coming into your area of space-time, will cause a disturbance in the magnetic field flux. So there's a baseline magnetic field that you can go out into the woods and just set it at zero so the magnetometer is quiet and at baseline zero. And then if you're out in a remote area where there's no electromagnetic devices such as cars or refrigerators or microwaves or anything like that, suddenly when these phenomena start happening and the ETs start moving in, even if they're not fully materialized, they will start causing the magnetic field flux to be measured on these magnetometers or on your iPhone or Android. And that's a really interesting thing that we've been able to document, and also on the laser and radar detectors like you use for detecting police radar on a car. We'll have those out there in an area where there's absolutely nothing that would make them go off. And when these objects are approaching, and even if they're not fully materialized in three-dimensional space-time, but that are there in a trans-dimensional energy form that is not fully solid, those detectors will start to go off, and in fact the beings, the ET beings, will utilize their electronic communications interface with their consciousness to go inside the circuitry of the magnetometers and the radar detectors to actually send sort of an encoded message format. And some of these magnetometer recordings that we have are really intelligent. They almost have an emotional quality. You can feel the intent of what they're saying. And then the trick is, of course, is to get very quiet and go into meditation and get a sense of what that sort of electronic signal is conveying in terms of substance and content, which in the last book, there's a whole chapter at the end called the Orion transmissions. One of the first times this happened in a prolonged way, we were in Joshua Tree National Park, and one of our radar detectors began to do this in the middle of this, 800,000 acre wilderness area. And it was just as I had lined up consciousness and this circular crystalline sphere with the Orion sector of space. And at that instant, we had this 23-minute download of very intense energy that was unbelievable, and not only how intense it was that everyone could feel and see, but also the message that came through. And so what I tried to do as it was happening was to speak the feeling and the meaning of the message. And that's in the last chapter of this book, Contact, Countdown the Transformation, that you can get at Amazon.com and other places now. But I just wanted to explain that, because what we really use when we go out into the field, we use really three central modalities for contact. The central operating system, if you want to look at it that way, is consciousness and the science of consciousness, because ET civilizations that go faster than the speed of light, by definition, must utilize technologies that go beyond linear space-time. And when you go beyond the speed of light, you go into other dimensions that are increasingly integrated directly with consciousness and consciousness forms, such as visualized thought, what the mystics used to call the astral realm. And so, but this is being done with technologies and communication systems, as well as with their innate ability, because when you see these ETs with their craft, they're actually touching something and thinking to it, and will navigate the craft to one point in the universe or another. So it's very advanced. It's way beyond these phones that we're talking on right now that are traveling at the speed of light, these phone signals. So that's something that is really important, is to understand the interface between the science of consciousness and our own innate ability to be aware of this aspect of mind that's non-local and omnipresent within us, and how that can be utilized through coherent thought and these meditative techniques to make contact. The second is that we have lasers and things that we send up into the sky. The ones we use go 200 miles into space in clear air, and those give the ETs a precise vector of where we're located, just in case our minds are a little fuzzy and our visualization capabilities are not as clear as they should be. And then we also have these electronic tones that we play, usually on a boom box, but you can play them on your iPhone or Android, that were recorded in the crop circles in England, but we've also have ones that we've had tones that have come into our circle, such as out at Mount Shasta, where we're going in a week or two. And those tones we then send out into space with little walkie-talkies, because we let them know that if they're wanting to get an exact and precise fix of where we're located, they can use the light and the electronic tones to do that. So we use all three of these modalities, and those are the principal modalities. Of course, the heart energy and consciousness is the central one. The message of welcoming them, of seeing them in your inner sight, of seeing that the consciousness within them and the consciousness within each of us is a singularity. It is the one mind of the cosmic being that is within all things. And then the heart space of this sort of the magnetism and the attraction of love, and this sort of pure and divine love that we send out along with the thought. So that's the central thing, but we do use these other technologies to get a more precise fix for them. But in addition to that, we have these electronic devices and things that we have that really are important, because often when we have a craft that appears that is fully materialized, within minutes there might be a military jet or a helicopter that comes over, and then, and this happened at Crestone last month, where then the ET craft literally dematerializes. We have this on film, by the way, Marilyn and Diane, from Crestone. You would not believe what happened. This ET craft came in from the northwest, came in, turned, came right over us. We have it on photos and video. And the filmmaker that's working on Sirius.neverendinglight.com with us, Armadi Kalika, saw this, and his assistant. It came in, it literally made like a big circle and dematerialized right in the frame of the film. And it did that just as a military jet that had been circling a little to the north, east, out towards Colorado Springs, where there's an Air Force base, came in very quickly with afterburners on, and the jet turned to try to intercept the ET craft to suppress it from coming into this dimension any further. And that's when this ET craft dematerialized, and we have all of this on videotape. So what's important to understand about that is that this means that we have to be enlightened enough to realize that interstellar civilizations that can dematerialize and go from one point in space to another in these other transdimensional energy forms, will do that, and they can literally we can be in a field where nothing is in this dimension quite fully materialized, and yet you'll see energy forms, and our electronics will begin to beep, and the magnetometers will begin to do things, and people will be touched, and they'll look over, and there'll be nothing there. And it's because the ETs are doing this both for their protection and ours, because, frankly, we still have a very militarized planet that ET vehicles, when they are fully in this dimension, frequently end up getting chased at and shot at by military systems. And this, of course, we have observed many, many times. And that's one of the reasons why, as ambassadors to the universe, we always invite them in a way that says, please come in any way that is safe and appropriate for this time and place. Because now, if we say that, we need to mean it and understand that an ET craft may be there fully visible and fully materialized, but it also may be literally in the field around us, but in a dimension that is shifted faster than the speed of light or electrons or matter, but that will begin to give us these subtle and not so subtle evidences of their presence, whether it be in consciousness and thought or these electronics or what have you. And that, it begins to be the really nuanced and very exciting part of contact that is much more intimate than most people can even imagine.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Well, and Stephen, I think one thing that I've really gotten from our group is, as our group understands the truth of inner sight and the truth of working on higher consciousness through our meditations and using your meditations and then silent meditation in the group, and as we connect with the heart path, that, and everybody in the group, there's nobody that has to get caught up to date with that. Everybody understands that we go right into it, and I think the acceleration of ET contact is just enormous.
Right.
With that happening. I mean, I have to say, one night there was a golden ship that came right over our house. It must have been 1,000 feet in the air. It was totally materialized. It was golden with rays of light coming out of it like a star. But it was moving across over the house, 1,000 feet up, slowly, very slowly, and kind of changed its path and then wove in and out. It was just kind of floating. And that golden craft has been here about 3 times.
Wow.
1,000 feet above the house, yeah. We call it the golden craft of Israel.
What shape? Did you get a sense of the shape of it?
You know, it felt round, but it was hard because there were these golden rays of light kind of coming out of it from all directions. I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
A huge glowing golden, almost round, a ball of some kind.
Wow, that's
how it
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diana, did you see that also?
Yes, And we have a small working group that meets just about every night, and those other members too, Jen and Sarah, who you met, they have seen it too, and this has happened where all 4 of us have seen this huge golden, we call it our golden ship, and it's been amazing.
Well, in fact, one night we were at dinner, and we were talking about this golden craft and the Sea Study group coming up, and an orb even came into the dining room, this white orb, and it was hovering on the porch. And 2 minutes later, these 2 military helicopters, this was at night, and we ran out and saw them right over the house, and they were chasing a white light.
Right. That's unfortunately what happens from one end of it. The other end of it, though, is that the ETs are aware of that, and they adjust for it. So long as we can adjust, then we have to keep up. That's what I tell people. We have to keep up with the reality of transdimensional physics and science and the science of consciousness, and then it's easy because these military guys are running around these clunky things, and
it did the same thing. It disappeared right in front of our eyes. At first we thought it was disappearing over the trees, but twice we would see it so clearly, and then it was just totally gone. It just dematerialized in a second.
It's interesting that you described this golden. At Mount Shasta last year. Who knows what will happen this year? But we had on multiple occasions this about the same height you're talking about, a few hundred feet to maybe 1,000 feet up, which is fairly close, fully materialized golden. I mean, it's gold object, and it wasn't. But what we saw wasn't quite round. I got the sense that it might have had a little bit of a chevron or angular shape to it, but the light gave off all this light. And even when it would be behind us, it would be bright enough that it would catch my peripheral vision. I'd turn and see it, and people on the other side of our circle would see it also. And it's really distinct because then it totally disappears, and it's obvious not an aircraft or anything like that. And it can actually be completely stationary. In fact, a couple of times it just would appear, not move at all, and then disappear in the same spot and having not moved at all. And so one of the things we're going to try to get this year at Mount Shasta is, and Emery Smith is helping us put this together, is a 360 filming, because, the night scope cameras we have only get 10% of the sky each.
Right.
We're missing 80, the two cameras get 20%, so we're really only getting, we're missing 80% of the sky. So what we're going to try to do is set up these really high-tech cameras that have a zillion megapixels that can be put in video mode, that are the quality of a still camera, but they'll be running, and it'll get the whole sky the whole night. That's what we're going to try to experiment with this week. Now, we're having to lay out, $10,000 or $15,000 to do that. But I think it's so important to document these things, because frequently these sort of ET craft, when they do fully materialize in our dimension, will be here briefly, and then they'll dematerialize and be around us, but they're beyond what anything can photograph, even if it picks up electronically. So what we're wanting to do is that when they do fully materialize in this dimension, before there's a military chopper or anything sent in, that they're able to be captured on a video or a photograph. So we're trying to improve our ability to do that kind of recording.
That's fantastic. Well, because the last sea study meeting we had weeks ago, there were craft that seemed to be the same craft that just were going back and forth from the south to the north and the north to the south. And if we had had a camera that night, usually we do, but we didn't that night,
right,
you could really, I think, would be able to tell that it was the same craft. And of course, satellites don't move back and forth. And it was clearly this craft that stayed around, 15 minutes, just going back and forth. It was wonderful.
Wow. Oh, that's so exciting. Well, the other thing that you mentioned that I think is really important to talk about for a moment is how key it is for the group to be in that coherence, and that the people are really all on the same page, because what the ETs are looking for with humans are ambassador teams to interface with. So it's not just purely one-on-one and anecdotal, because it's going from contact with individuals to contact with these ambassador groups, building up to contact with the entire planet as a planetary. Okay, so we're that stepping stage, and so these citizen diplomacy groups like yours are so important. But for them to function, it is the thing that is most determinative is the intent, the pure-hearted intent of the group, and the coherence of the group to be able to be in this deep meditative state and go into that state of remote view and deep consciousness and also deep heart space. And what that does also is that it creates in the Akashic record of your land, as it were, a sort of a power spot potentiation where your land is now become, as it were, initiated into this process. And even within the structure of space-time, there is this omnipresent consciousness field. And therefore, where you're doing this contact on your land, day after day and week after week, creates a very powerful energy that remains there all the time. And this is why, when people find that if they're doing meditation, if they find a certain place in their house that they do it all the time, it does facilitate the depth of the meditation. Or that if you go to a place that has had some very sacred or enlightened event take place that happened thousands of years ago, you can go there and still feel it. On the other hand, if there's something terrible that's happened, you can feel it. So there is an Akashic record that is actually encoded within the fabric of space-time, because consciousness is omnipresent. And all of linear space-time is actually a kind of a crystallization, as it were, of the pure consciousness into the linearity of space-time in the matrix of matter and space and time and what have you, but it's all conscious. And so this consciousness and the feeling that is created during a contact event, and particularly where you keep going back to the same place or on your own land, it really does create that energy that then remains there and then potentiates further contact.
Wow, what a beautiful explanation. Because that's exactly it, Stephen. In fact, I have to bring this up with you. There is we're right on a stream, and there's a huge boulder. It's maybe 6 feet by 8 feet.
Wow.
And many people have started to have visions that there's a portal there. And people have crawled up on this boulder and seen red orbs coming right down the stream. People's hair stands up on their arm. Diane's son had a dream that ships were landing right there by the boulder. And he said it was the most lucid dream he had. So it feels like there's this portal that's open wide up. And before we start in the group, many people want to go to the rock and sit and get grounded before we start because they feel like there's this incredible opening out there.
Wow. Well, and that is true that there can be certain areas where, for whatever electromagnetic reasons, and remember, boulders are crystals. Even normal rocks, they're all crystalline. Look at them under a microscope. All rocks are crystalline, even if it's not pure quartz crystal. And a lot of people don't realize that about the sort of the mineral kingdom. And so if you look at that's very interesting. And the fact that the ET technologies and the transdimensional nature of them do have a sort of resonant factor with crystalline structures. And that may very well be the case. And, of course, the Earth itself, frequently there will be areas where these objects will be seen not quite fully materialized, emerging from the Earth. Because if they're in the Earth, and they can be underwater, in the Earth, out in space, they can be in these other dimensions, but there can be sort of as it will, an attraction or a resonance component because of this crystalline nature of both water and stone. And so that does facilitate things materializing. And it's not that it's required, but it may just be something where it will be more evident because of the subtle energy that is there. And this is a whole area of science that I know that if you look at the work that was done by Marcel Vogel at IBM and dealing with crystals and what have you, it's a really important area of science that I've never actually delved into publicly, but I know a great deal about. And there are people on our team who worked with Marcel Vogel at IBM and with all these these amazing properties. Some would call them magical properties of crystalline structures. But it's not just pure quartz crystals or other types of minerals. It's any rock is a crystal. And remember the work of Amato, the Japanese scientist who found that water, crystal structure in water, you can put your consciousness in it, and it actually does get recorded in water. And so water is crystalline, and so is glass. And people don't realize that, of course, glass windows are actually a liquid. That's why very old glass looks like it's running, but it's actually alive and liquid. So all glass, like all the glass in your house, is actually chemically classified as a liquid. A lot of people don't realize that. And so you have these liquid crystal aspects of this that crosses into potentiation of transdimensional energies. And this is also why many of the quote-unquote free energy so-called devices, one of the scientists who was at Lawrence Berkeley Labs who was almost murdered when he discovered this, who's a very dear friend of mine, a physicist, brilliant physicist, he had barium titanate crystals that when he put an electronic signal in, electricity in at a certain resonant frequency, they would begin to vibrate, and the output wire was 10 times, 100 times more than the input, because the energy was being transduced or transformed from other dimensions through the crystalline structure. And that's what you find a lot of people who understand these ET vehicles, in the very center of them will be these crystalline forms that facilitate these transdimensional shifts in energy where they go from one dimension to another.
Wow.
I'm just trying to connect a few dots for folks.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, it is happening here. Everything you're describing is wonderful because it really puts it into perspective and what we're all feeling here. And I think why people are willing to come here from such distances, and there is it feels like an equation that is building exponentially, and everybody can do this.
Oh, that's the thing. That's the key thing is for everyone to understand that, you guys got introduced to this, 3 years ago or whenever, and came to the Outer Banks, but every single person can do this, and it isn't something that requires, you don't have to be like Ingo Swann or someone, you don't have to be. Every person, by virtue of being a human being who's conscious and sentient, can do this and experience it, and it's about intending to want to do it. And if you want to do it and believe you can, you will. And it's the truth.
Well, and it feels like the ETs are just waiting, and it's not them that need to show up, it's us that have to show up. And when we do,
exactly,
the way they want to communicate. I have to share another thing that happened, because I'd love your thoughts on this. And it happened in Arizona through the coyotes. The last time we met, we have owls around here, but they're very distant and they're not that close to the house. And we came out from break, sat down, and there was a chorus of owls, Stephen, that sounded like surround sound. They were in every tree, it felt like, all around the group, in the circle, hooting. And the beginning of the hoots sounded familiar to me, but the end of the hoots, where it was so different. I had never heard that sound before. Everybody got chills. It went on for probably 15 to 20 minutes. These owls, and people were like, some people were familiar with owl behavior, and we just couldn't place what they were doing, and finally we understood, and we went into meditation, and people felt like there were owl beings, and they were communicating tremendous amounts of information through their sound. And then during the meditation, I did a short meditation later, and as I was welcoming the creatures of the planet to our group with love, the owls at that very moment started sounding again, and again it sounded like they were in every tree around the entire group surrounding them. And it was probably one of the most incredible experiences with animals or birds that I've ever had in a sea study group. And it just felt like, as we know, many of these ETs they can come in many, many forms. It felt like they were here as owls, and people saw them in their vision as owl beings.
Right. And many people have had these sort of experiences with the owl-like ETs. And one time at Mount Shasta,
really?
We had 4 of them that were in the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, doing exactly what you're describing a few years ago. We were up in the National Forest at Mount Shasta, California. And by the way, people, just so you know, that we are going to Mount Shasta in a couple weeks, but there's a waiting list for that now, so we don't have any more spaces for that. But we will be doing an expedition in the Anza Borrega Wilderness in Southern California in November. So if you're interested in that, you can look into it at cseti.org, cseti.org. But the main thing is that we've had this happen over and over again with nature and Gaia, the Earth spirit consciousness, interfacing with what we're doing, and the ETs doing things that are unbelievable. And it happens in a lot of different ways. And what you described about it sounded like it was in like an echo chamber. We found that frequently when there's a craft that's not quite materialized, but it's all around us, it alters the fabric of space and creates what the audio engineers call an anechoic chamber, which is like a sound chamber. And we've had it happen
exactly it.
Yes, and we've had this happen probably a couple of dozen times, where we'll be out in the middle of nowhere, and there'll be a stream that's, a mile or 2 away, and suddenly it feels and sounds like it's 2 feet from us, rushing, and it's because of this space-time distortion of an anechoic chamber. And we have had this happen over and over and over again, and we know that it's definitely a phenomenon that's associated with the ETs that are very close.
Oh, that's boy, what a great way to understand that happening, because all of us felt it, and it was, and on the way home, 4 people were going back to New York City in their car, going along the Taconic Parkway. They saw a snow owl, which I don't even think we have in this region, sitting in a tree.
Wow.
That night's theme was definitely the owl, but it's wonderful how, and sometimes breezes will come up. It feels like the ETs will use so many things that we understand to communicate with us, whether it is touch or using trees or nature, earth, and it's beautiful how much they try to communicate with us. And I always say, if you're not getting communications with the ET, it probably has more to do with you than them.
Oh, sure, because, I mean, they're waiting for people to be in a state of coherence and being awakened, and then it's very effortless. And well, Diane, what are some of the things that you've experienced and seen lately?
I was just reflecting on this amazing experience that the smaller working group we had either last night or the night before, and we have these chairs that we lay in that are very comfortable. And it seems like as soon as we go into the chairs and go into just opening our hearts and going into just a brief connecting, the ETs start appearing in these ships, in craft that we see going back and forth. But the other night, the whole sky was clear, just absolutely clear. There was not a cloud in the sky.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, this cloud formation came right over. There were four of us right over our chairs. And it stayed there. And it looked rather curious because the whole sky was clear. And we kept watching it, and we said, what is this? And then we looked up, and before we knew it, the clouds started disappearing, not moving with the wind. They started disappearing and forming, I kid you not, the letters X and then O. X-O. We all saw it, and then a second later, poof, there weren't any clouds left. It was completely gone.
Wow. So they were giving you a big cosmic kiss. That is amazing. You know, years ago, we had some people doing this in West Virginia, and it was very cloudy and this and that, and it was on a lot of brand new trainees, and people were going, well, you know, everyone thinks, you know, the ET craft is going to come in like a Steven Spielberg movie, and you're going to climb on board and have bagels and lox. But what happened was that people were going, well, you know, they had the meditation, there were some subtle phenomena, and at the end, someone would say, oh, I wish we could just see an ET. Suddenly, in the sky, a cloud, quote unquote, materialized that formed two letters, E-T.
Oh,
and
my
everyone
God.
saw it. And it was like, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, you know, and it's, you know, and that's when you know they're there. They're there as far as they felt safe to be there for whatever reasons. And yet they will do something like that is mind-blowing, that you would be almost like in a science fiction film, except by a whole group of people. And that is just amazing. One other time, years ago, I took a group down to Mount Popo, the big volcano outside Mexico City, and we were on the far back side of it near Atli Mayaya. And we had this massive, huge, 800-900 feet on each side triangular ship, and then a circular craft come out of the volcano and circle us and signal to us and then vanish. And then it was later that night, and we were really tired because we had flown from the United States, and then had only been there a couple of days. And Sherry Adamak was with me, and a few other people, another medical doctor, and we looked over, and to the sky, to the left of the volcano, were two brilliant stars that were right in line with each other, like two eyes. And in a crystal clear desert sky, a head, it looked just like an ET head, of clouds formed around those stars, so that the head was almost like two-thirds the size of the volcano, and there were these two bright stars that were the eyes, with this ET face just shining from the sky looking at us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it.
And we went, oh, my God, you got to be kidding. And, these sort of things. So a lot of times, you're so right to point out to folks that there are these phenomena that happen in nature which are not natural phenomena, but they'll utilize natural phenomena, whether it's an animal or the clouds or something else, as a way of sending that they get it, that they know you're there making contact, and they'll make contact, that it'll be through these indirect means. Because every time we've had a craft like a Crestone that's fully materialized, that floats over, in comes a military jet or a helicopter. And, of course, at Mount Shasta, as you all know, a few years ago, we had one that came out of the mountain, and there was a weapon system fired at it that crashed into the woods right in front of us. Right. It was an electromagnetic energy weapon. And I've always told the ETs, that this planet is not exactly the Garden of Eden, the peace yet, and to do this in a way that is safe for everyone concerned, them and humans as well as the ETs. And so everyone has to be very aware of the fact that this is part of the dynamic, and they're willing to do a lot if you're conscious enough and intuitive enough to see how it's happening. And then every once in a while there'll be something, like you said, this golden ship that just floats right over your house and sits there. That's so unmistakable. But then there are all these subtle things that happen, which in a way, many times I find more endearing and amazing than the others.
Well, and I think it also, what it's teaching all of us in the group is to use our subtle vision, our subtle kinesthetic cues, it's teaching us the subtleties of consciousness. Exactly. And all of a sudden they start showing up through those channels. It's beautiful because really we're learning how to do this. How to
taking people into what I call unity consciousness, where you begin to realize that it's not that you're just awake, but the earth is awake. The air you're looking at, the space that you're looking at with your eyes, it's all consciousness resonating and phasing as space or time or a star or a bird or a tree, but all of it is pure consciousness. And so all this is that, and the people at the World Fusion Network understand this concept, but it actually begins to put it in play. And these interstellar civilizations get that. They completely understand it. And really the big leap, I tell people these free energy technologies, anti-gravity systems, those should have all been out 50 to 100 years ago. The big science of the next 1,000 years and on forward beyond that is the science of consciousness, of mind, of understanding all this interplay. And that's what's most exciting about all this. And it's the central concept to comprehend, apprehend, live, and begin to experience, to be an ambassador to the universe, as we call it, to be in contact with these civilizations. Because if they're traveling from one galaxy or star system to here, they are crossing through dimensions that are conscious and light and all these kinds of phenomena, and they get that in a fully operational way. And so they're trying to sort of nudge us into this new paradigm, a new reality, so that we can actually interface with them in a way that's meaningful.
Yes, and what's amazing, I find, is that the more you use your consciousness and open your heart, there's this, it's almost like a cortex. It goes back and forth, and the more that you extend your consciousness and heart out to the ETs, they'll start playing with you more. And just one quick little anecdote, we often sleep in a tent on our property, and the top is open to the stars. There's no tarp on it or anything. And one night after our last expedition, a bunch of us went to sleep in the tent and looked up at the sky. And I was just sort of, in my heart saying goodnight to the ETs. And I kid you not, but it was like, we call it a streaker, just twice. It looked like a ship just quickly passing exactly over this little window above our tent, as if they're just saying goodnight.
Oh,
and they went,
God.
And it happened twice, because I went, what? And it went on one side of the tent that was open, and then it came back a second later. And it was just amazing, because I really felt like I was connecting with them through my heart and saying goodnight, and then they connected right with me, and I was blown away by that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, that reminds me of the time at Mount Shasta where we were standing out in the National Forest. We were making our closing circle, and there were like 40 of us, I don't know. It was a big training, and we were making a circle, and I was doing sort of a closing prayer and meditation for the earth. And at that instant, two objects came out of the east, and they rose and they went together from horizon, from east to west, across the entire sky to say goodnight to us. And it was two fully materialized craft that in just a couple of seconds, everyone saw this, and it went right across the sky. And actually what was interesting, in Crestone last month, we had an object just like that came out of the east, and it was right at a point in a meditation where we were doing this healing for Mother Earth and the healing of humanity to go forward as a peaceful people. And at that moment, this craft, a golden craft, you could actually see the form of it, came out of the east and went horizon to the west, right over the group, and you could hear it. People could actually hear it moving across it. It was one of the most astonishing sightings. And interesting, the filmmaker was there and saw it. That it was the first night he came out, and he went, "What in the world?" I said, "Yeah, well, this is what happens."
Right.
So it's fun to introduce people to these things. And by the way, people who want to support the film project, I just want to talk for a moment. The reason we're working on this is to bring out the whole concept of disclosure, contact, transdimensional science of consciousness, and free energy systems in a 2-hour feature documentary that we're working on. We're doing it totally from what's called crowdfunding, from the public supporting it. And you can go to Sirius.neverendinglife.com, and for various donation levels, you get a copy of the film, or a trip on a training, or kind of tickets to the premiere, or what have you, and you can see what those are. We're also, and this is very sensitive, I'm going to speak very carefully, so listen carefully. A couple of years ago, Dr. Bravo, who's a fellow emergency physician who's on our board of directors for disclosureproject.org and ccity.org, and I went to a foreign country, that's all I can say, and I was the third person to ever handle this dead, deceased extraterrestrial being. Now, it is a physical specimen. We're told it's ET. That's not yet been proven. It's a possibility we can include this in this film. It's going to be, unfortunately, very costly to do the genetic testing, the MRI scans, the geneticist review, our anthropological reviews, and all of this. It has to be done to vet and check this out thoroughly. At this point, the institute that has this little being, which has been dead for an undetermined amount of time, is willing to cooperate. What people have to understand is that I have held it, I've examined it, I've looked at the x-rays of it. It is not a plaster of Paris hoax. It is not any birth defect that I know of, although we're having some geneticists review it. It most certainly is not a predecessor of Homo sapiens, in other words, a hominid like Lucy or one of these ancient ones, because it's a fairly fresh body. It's got some connective tissue still on it. It's mostly skeletal, but there is some fascia, we call it, and connective tissue and neural tissue in the skull and the brain. I've examined it very thoroughly. There's no question that it's an actual biological specimen. If it is what we think it is, it would be dispositive and explosive. So if people want to help support our being able to check this out further, they can also help us at Sirius.neverendinglife.com, because what Dr. Bravo and I want to do is a full scientific examination, including various scientific scanning, MRIs, possibly radioisotopes and carbon dating, although that's problematic because we don't want to damage the creature by taking large samples. We want to be able also to do a full genetic comparison to Homo sapiens, as well as any other known existing hominids that may be in archaeological or anthropological databases. So this is a substantial undertaking. One person wrote to my blog and said, "Boy, do you really want to try to do that on top of everything else you're doing between now and December to get this film completed?" But I said, this is like the pearl of great price. This one you don't throw away. You don't toss this one back into the ocean. So that is something we're trying to pursue. At this point, we cannot reach any firm conclusions, except I can say dispositively that it is not a hoax in terms of being a biological specimen. It is definitely a biological specimen. It is definitely a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and it doesn't look like anything human. So, and it's not just like a skull that may or may not be a deformed human skull like some of the things that you've seen on the internet. This is an entire body. So, we're trying to pursue this. Obviously, the security concerns and the scientific issues around this are mind-boggling. The only reason I'm mentioning it is, number one, we're going to need funding support to do the proper testing. Number two, the more that people know we're even in pursuing this, it creates a zone of protection around us, because paradoxically, the more the people who know what we're doing, the more protected we are. A lot of people couldn't understand when I was doing Disclosure Project 10 years ago why I started talking about the 115 or so top secret people that we had that we were interviewing. I said it's because you can't buy the kind of protection that millions of people knowing what you're doing can give you, because these classified and rather shadowy projects do not want to step into a billion-watt spotlight. So on the one hand, we have to do this rather discreetly and carefully at the request of the people who have this specimen. On the other hand, I'm loath to do it in secrecy because I think it's highly risky. So that's why we're talking about it today. So those of you who kind of read between the lines of what I'm telling you, this is something that we want to do in the next, probably in the next 60 days. So time is of the essence. Unfortunately, the genetic testing on this could take some time, and for this data to make its way into this historic film, which you can see a description of it, serious.neverendinglight.com, that's going to require some type of real planning, and we may have to actually, unfortunately, do a global search of a proper institute that can do this in a timely fashion, because it's a serious amount of scientific testing that has to be done. But at any rate, we are pursuing it. I have green-lighted that effort. I talk about it on my blog, which is Dr. Greer's blog.disclosureproject.org, and there's a link to it from our sites. So I just wanted to give people a heads up about this. This is kind of late-breaking news. And Dr. Bravo is heading up the coordination of this scientific team. Dr. Ted Loader would also be helping us, who's our science advisor, who's Professor Emeritus, University of New Hampshire. And there's some other scientists we're working with who wish to remain anonymous at this point. But if anybody listening can help us with this, then let us know. And if you can help with the support of creating this film, we have enough to do sort of the rudimentary of a feature film, but this is not a $5 million film budget. It's, it's a couple $100,000, but, thanks to everyone who contributed. But if we could get some more funding, we could do a better film and include more evidence and do more witness interviews and with military and other people who are coming forward. There's a new CIA witness who's come forward, many people have heard about, who's confirmed the Roswell event. So we're wanting to include as many things as possible. Each thing we want to add, of course, costs funds to go and film and travel, and there's just a lot of out-of-pocket expenses with doing a film like this. So any support that anyone can give us who's listening, we do appreciate it. And for those of you who have already supported what we're doing with this project, I want to thank all of you sincerely, because it's helped us to be able to greenlight the initial budget for the production company and the filmmaker to go forward, and we're off and running. So it's a very, very exciting time.
Wow. Well, and Stephen, I just want to echo that as we all are doing this work on the planet, and you were the incredibly courageous person who started so much of this, and your protocols are protocols all of us can do, and the more we all do it, the safer you become, and that's real important to me, because the truth is, the more we all do it and the more ETs make themselves visible and contact is felt around the world, the more disclosure will take place, and this film is just going to top it all off, and
exactly.
I'm so excited.
Well, and Diane and Marilyn, you can just confirm that you've actually seen photos of me with this little specimen.
Yes, we've seen photos, and they're absolutely amazing, and there's no question about it. In the photos, this looks like an absolute biological being of some kind, and it is not human.
Yeah, there's no mistaking the pictures. It is definitely not human, and it's very real, and we both attest to that completely.
And I can tell you, having examined it and held it, of course I did so carefully with gloves on and whatnot, and examined the x-rays. In fact, Marilyn and Diane have seen me with the x-rays and with the being itself. But,
yes.
This is definitely a biological. This is not like, is it the alien autopsy thing? Is it a model? Is it a hoax? Is it this? I mean, the question is, what is it? It has gone through some review processes at a university, ruling out any existing known hominids. Hominids, by the way, are the predecessors to Homo sapiens, of course, on the evolutionary tree. But, the question then becomes, could it be some bizarre defect of a known human congenital birth defect? Could it be? We have to do a thorough examination, and this, of course, if NASA had a sample like this, they'd probably spend $200 or $300 million on it. So we're going to try to do it with what we can get, but it just the out of pocket to do the MRIs, the other scientific testing, the genetic testing is going to be substantial. I'll just tell you, we're still in the process of putting together a budget for that. But anyone who can help with that, we appreciate it, because this is something that is
people need to understand this could be some of the most pinpointed confirming evidence that we have on the
Yes, short of going to an underground base at Fort Huachuca or so-called 51 or something, and dragging a body out of the chambers there that they've shot down and killed. Yes, and so this is not something that this is not an opportunity that comes along every minute. And I've been doing this for 22 years, and I can tell you I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
So. Well, I believe we're out of time. I'd like to thank Marilyn and Diane. You're just awesome people, and you're doing great work there in New York with all the folks and keeping the torch alive for contact. And I hope sometime to join you up there on your land. It sounds wonderful.
Well, you absolutely have to, and you're invited anytime. And thank you, Stephen, for your amazing, brilliant work on this planet.
Thank you. Okay, and thanks to everyone at the World Puja Network. I appreciate you hosting us every 2 weeks. This has been Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and until next time, keep looking up and